I returned home from a business trip to find my apartment empty. My parents had packed everything. "You won't need these things anymore," Dad said. After 8 months and 156 ignored calls, they had finally made contact. "Thank you for being here with me today. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. I'd love for you to share in the comments what city or country you're watching this from and what time it is there now." Let's begin our story together. The hum of the Boeing 777's engines, hours after landing, was still a faint whisper in my ears. A phantom vibration settled deep in my bones. 2 weeks on an international business trip, juggling time zones and high-stakes negotiations for my Austin-based software company, had left me drained but wired. Success, a hard-won contract I metaphorically clutched in my fist, was a potent stimulant. Yet all I craved was the mundane comfort of my own space. My meticulously organized apartment, a sanctuary of quiet order that mirrored the way I liked my code. Clean, logical, everything in its designated place. I could already picture the ritual. Dropping my luggage by the door, the satisfying click of the deadbolt, the aroma of my preferred coffee beans, a dark Sumatra roast as I brewed a much-needed cup. The first step in shedding the skin of Michael Chun, senior engineer, and becoming simply Michael. The Uber pulled up to my building, a modest but well-maintained 3-story structure in a quiet part of town. As I paid the driver, I registered a prickle of unease. My front door, usually a pristine navy blue, had a couple of unfamiliar light-colored scuffs near the handle, as if something bulky had scraped against it. I frowned, dismissing it as perhaps maintenance work, my mind still half-focused on the presentation I'd tackled in Singapore. The key turned smoothly in the lock. I pushed the door inward, anticipation blooming in my chest for the familiar sight of my sunlit living room. My worn leather armchair, the overflowing bookshelf that was my pride. Instead, I stepped into an echo. The air was stale, not with the comforting scent of my books and coffee, but with the faint, cloying smell of lemon polish, my mother's preferred brand, a scent I hadn't encountered in my own home since I moved out a decade ago. Sunlight, yes, but streaming through bare windows, illuminating dust motes, dancing in the cavernous emptiness where my life used to be. My sofa gone. My coffee table vanished. The rug, the lamp, the art prints I'd carefully chosen, all erased. My breath hitched. For a disorienting moment, I thought I'd walked into the wrong apartment, the wrong building, the wrong life. Then I saw them, lined up in the narrow hallway outside my unit. Like grotesque offerings were large brown cardboard boxes, some sealed haphazardly with taut packing tape, others gaping open, spilling my life onto the worn industrial carpet. My clothes, books, oh God, my precious first editions, personal documents, kitchen utensils, even my damn toothbrush in a Ziploc baggie perched precariously atop a box overflowing with my running shoes. Each box was a punch to the gut. The cheap, slightly damp smell of cardboard filled my nostrils, a sense of displacement, of violation. My chest tightened as if someone had wrapped my lungs in barbed wire. This wasn't a mistake. This was an eviction, a demolition. Mr. Ramirez, the building superintendent, an elderly, kindly man with tired eyes, emerged from the stairwell. His expression was a mixture of pity and apprehension. He carried a bucket and mop, his usual late-afternoon companions. "Michael," he said softly, "you're back." "Mr. Ramirez, what happened?" My own voice was a strangled whisper. He shifted his weight, avoiding my gaze for a moment. "Your parents, Michael, they were here a few days ago with movers." He made a vague gesture with a calloused hand. "They said you were moving, that everything was arranged with you. They had a key and everything. A key. The spare key I'd given them years ago for emergencies." A torrent of icy dread coursed through me, so cold it burned. An emergency? They called this an emergency? This brutal dismantling of my existence, of my carefully constructed independence, packed away like unwanted junk? The drive to my parents' house in Houston was a 2-hour blur of cold fury and a sick, churning disbelief. Highway signs were just green blurs against a sky turning gray. Each mile replayed a decade of slights, of their subtle and not-so-subtle disdain for my career. Not a real business, Michael. Just playing with computers, their constant refrain that I should be closer to home, working in the family business. For years, I dutifully sent a significant portion of my income home, supporting them, propping up that vague, perpetually struggling restaurant supply company my older brother, Leo, supposedly managed. I'd foregone vacations, investments, all to be the good son. And for what? For this? Their house, the one I'd grown up in, looked exactly the same. Manicured lawn, rose bushes my mother fussed over, the heavy oak front door. But as I slammed my car, door shut, the house I'd grown up in suddenly felt alien. Every familiar family photo hung on its walls like an accusation. I found them in the living room, a tableau of such baffling normalcy it made my stomach churn. My father, Mr. Chun, was engrossed in a golf tournament on the giant screen TV, a sweating glass of iced tea on the coaster beside him. My mother was knitting, the rhythmic click of her needles the only sound aside from the muted tones of the sports commentators. And there, sprawled on the floral sofa like he owned the place, which, in his mind, he probably did, was Leo, a smirk playing on his lips as he scrolled through his phone. Some of my boxes, I noted with a fresh wave of nausea, were already stacked in their garage, visible through the connecting door. "What have you done?" The words ripped from my throat, hoarse and louder than I'd intended. My father muted the TV, his movements slow, his expression one of mild surprise, as if I were merely interrupting his afternoon leisure. "Michael, you're finally home. We were expecting you." My mother set down her knitting, her smile strained. "Yes, dear, it's much better for you here. We need you. Leo needs your help with the business. My apartment," I managed, my hands clenching into fists, "is empty. You've thrown my life into boxes." My father finally rose, adopting the stern, authoritarian tone that had governed my childhood. "Don't be dramatic, Michael. We're your parents. We know what's best. That career of yours in Austin is unstable, a distraction. It's time you settled down, came home, and worked in a real family business. You don't need those things anymore. We've chosen a better life for you." Leo snorted from the sofa. "Yeah, Mickey, stop playing with your computer toys. Time to do some real work and pull your weight for once." The audacity, the sheer gall. After years of me propping them up, my mother chimed in, her voice laced with that familiar, manipulative sweetness. "We're a family, Michael. What's yours is ours, especially when you're making foolish decisions." I stared at the three of them, faces that were supposed to represent love, support, sanctuary. The betrayal, raw and brutal, scraped at my insides. My sacrifices, my career, my independence, all dismissed, erased, because they had chosen a better life for me. They didn't see a son, a successful professional. They saw a resource to control, a tool to utilize. "I want my key back," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I rarely allowed myself to feel. "And I want my belongings. Now." His face hardened further. "You can go through your things once you've settled into your old room. They're perfectly safe here." My old room. As if the last 10 years of my life, my entire adult existence, had been a temporary detour. "It's for your own good, Michael," he added, his voice a chilling echo of 1,000 childhood lectures. I couldn't breathe in that house for another second. I turned and walked out, their pronouncements, their utter conviction in their own righteousness, chasing me into the humid Houston air. I checked into a sterile hotel room, the impersonal walls a stark reflection of the hollowness they had carved inside me. My life, reduced to cardboard. The first call I made from that soulless hotel room was to Sarah, my friend from college, now a sharp, pragmatic lawyer in Dallas. She listened in stunned silence as the story poured out of me, a torrent of disbelief, of fractured rage. "They did what?" she finally exclaimed, her voice a mix of outrage and professional assessment. "Michael, that's unbelievable. Illegal entry, misappropriation of property, my God." Her validation was a small, reassuring pinprick of light in the overwhelming darkness. Under her guidance, I drafted a formal email to my parents. It was concise, devoid of the emotion churning within me, stating the facts: their unauthorized entry, the removal of my possessions, and a firm demand for their immediate return, with a clear implication of legal action if they failed to comply. I also had the locks changed on my now empty apartment, a futile gesture for what they'd already taken, but a symbolic act of reclaiming a violated space. I secured my bank accounts. A sudden, chilling thought propelled me to ensure they couldn't extend their reach there, too. Their reaction was instantaneous and exactly what I should have expected. My phone erupted in a barrage of calls, voicemails, and texts. My mother's messages were tearful, laden with guilt. "How could you do this to us, Michael? After all we've sacrificed for you. Your father is heartbroken." Sacrificed. The irony was a bitter pill. My father's messages were short, sharp bursts of fury. "Ungrateful. You are an ungrateful son. Family is everything, and you're throwing it away." Leo chimed in with a series of mocking texts. "Enjoying your freedom on the mean streets, little brother? Don't come crying to us when your fancy computer games don't pay the rent." Each notification was a fresh stab of pain, a tightening of the invisible wires around my chest. The old guilt, so deeply ingrained, threatened to suffocate me. But Sarah's voice, calm and logical, during our late-night calls was my lifeline. "This isn't love, Michael," she'd said firmly. "It's control. It's manipulation. You have every right to your life, your property, your choices." I managed to retrieve some essential documents and a few changes of clothes from their garage a few days later, the atmosphere thick with unspoken accusations and my parents' martyred silence. Leo watched from the doorway, a smirk on his face as I loaded a couple of boxes into my rental car. My father's parting shot as I drove away. "You'll come to your senses, Michael. Blood is thicker than water." But I knew, with a chilling certainty that settled deep in my gut, that I wouldn't. This wasn't just about an empty apartment. This was about my life, my autonomy, my very self. So I made the hardest decision of my life. I cut off all contact. I blocked their numbers. Their emails went to a specially created filter, unread. I blocked them on the few social media platforms I used. The calls kept coming for weeks, each one flashing on my caller ID. Mom, home landline. And I let them ring, my heart hammering, my stomach twisting into knots. 156 times I counted. 156 unanswered calls over the next 8 months. Each ring was a fresh wave of guilt, a reminder of the chasm I'd opened, but also, paradoxically, a small, hard-won act of reclaiming my peace, of drawing a line in the sand. The voicemails, when I accidentally let one through before blocking, were a painful cocktail of pleas, demands, feigned concern, and finally, just silence. During those first few weeks, I had a brief, hesitant phone call with Aunt Susan, my father's younger sister. She lived several states away and had always been the quietest, most observant member of the Chun clan. Unlike other relatives who, I later learned, eagerly parroted my parents' narrative of the ungrateful, rebellious son, Aunt Susan had simply said, her voice soft, a concern in it that felt genuine, "Michael, I just hope you're okay. Your father can be very determined when he thinks he's right." It wasn't much, a wavering murmur in the storm, but it was a crumb, tiny, almost unnoticed, of something other than condemnation. I clung to it. I found a new apartment, smaller than the last, the walls stark and bare. The process of furnishing it, piece by piece, was both therapeutic and a dull, constant ache. Every new towel, every plate, every cheap, flat-pack piece of furniture was a reminder of what I'd lost. Not just the objects themselves, but the history, the sentimental value, the feeling of a carefully curated life. The physical toll was immense. Sleepless nights were common, my mind replaying my father's pronouncements, my mother's tearful accusations, Leo's smirking face. I lost weight. My focus at work, usually laser-sharp, suffered. But amid the emotional wreckage, something else began to stir. A spark of defiance, a desperate need to prove, if only to myself, that I was more than their pawn, more than their financial safety net. I dusted off an old startup idea I'd shelved years ago, a niche software solution for small businesses designed to streamline their operations. Nexus Flow, the name came to me one sleepless night. The idea of building something from scratch on my own terms became an obsession. It was a direct counter-narrative to their suffocating insistence on the family business. I poured my meager savings into it, took out a small personal loan. My new, austere apartment became my office. Long nights bled into early mornings, fueled by cheap coffee and an almost manic energy. Coding became my solace, my rebellion. Each line of code was a brick in my new foundation, a declaration of independence. Then came the lowest point, a point where I truly thought they might break me, even from afar. Nexus Flow was in its early, vulnerable stages. I was applying for a small but crucial local business development grant, the kind that could give a fledgling company like mine a much-needed boost and a stamp of legitimacy. I'd poured weeks into the application, polishing every word, every projection. A few days before the decision was due, I received a call from a contact on the grant committee, someone I knew casually through a tech meetup. His tone was hesitant. "Mike," he said, "there's been some additional scrutiny on your application. Some questions have been raised about your stability, your reliability." My blood ran cold. "What kind of questions?" "Nothing specific," he said evasively. "Just background noise, rumors." It didn't take a genius to figure out the source. Leo must have learned about my grant application through the family grapevine. News, especially bad news, or my potential failures, always traveled fast. I later confirmed he'd subtly poisoned the well, contacting a distant acquaintance on the committee, spreading veiled but damaging insinuations about my untrustworthiness, my flightiness, amplifying the narrative of the son who abandoned his family in their time of need. He didn't need to shout. A whisper in the right ear was enough. That night, I sat alone in my still unfamiliar apartment. The grant rejection letter finally arrived, polite but firm, on the cheap particle board table in front of me. I stared at an old family photo on my phone's gallery, a photo from happier times, or so I believed. My parents, smiling. A younger, more guileless Leo. And me, grinning, oblivious. My fingers trembled so badly I dropped the phone. The screen cracked against the linoleum floor. A wave of crushing despair washed over me. I felt like they could still reach me, still drag me down, no matter how far I ran. I stared at the family photo, at the image from which I had been cut out, not literally from that photo, but from their definition of acceptable, of worthy. I almost gave up then. The weight of their disapproval, their relentless campaign to control me, felt unbearable. This is it, I thought. This is the breaking point. The point where I break. But then, something did break. Not me. My patience. My willingness to be their victim. A different kind of fire ignited in my gut. Not the slow burn of resentment, but the hot, fierce blaze of righteous anger. They wanted to break me. They wanted to see me fail. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. I picked up my phone, the cracked screen a spiderweb across our smiling faces. I deleted the photo. I grabbed my laptop and worked. I worked with a ferocity I didn't know I possessed. If one door closed, I would build another. Nexus Flow would not just survive, it would thrive. It had to. 8 months. 8 months of relentless work, of rebuilding not just a life, but an identity separate and distinct from the one my family had tried to force upon me. Nexus Flow, against all odds and despite Leo's earlier attempt at sabotage, had not only survived, but was starting to gain real traction. I'd managed to secure a different and smaller seed funding round from an angel investor who believed in my vision, not my family connections. We had a handful of paying clients, positive buzz in the local tech scene, and I was even looking to hire my first employee. The silence from my family had become a strange, sort of background hum, a void I was slowly learning to live with. Then came the certified letter, a thick cream-colored envelope with the logo of a Houston law firm embossed in the corner. My stomach clenched. I knew, even before I opened it, that the silence was about to be broken. Simultaneously, as if on cue, my phone rang. An unknown Houston number. I almost ignored it, my hands still hovering over the ominous letter, but something made me answer. "Michael!" It was my father's voice, strained but still imbued with that unshakable authority I knew so well. "We need to talk. It's about your new venture." My heart hammered against my ribs. Nexus Flow. What about it? Don't be naive, Michael, he said, his tone hard. We have a stake in this. A stake. The words hung in the air, absurd and chilling. A stake. What are you talking about? This is my company. I built it from nothing. His sigh was heavy, laden with feigned disappointment. All those years we supported your education, your living expenses when you were just starting out, that was an investment, Michael. An investment in you, and by extension, in what you build. Your brother Leo found the promissory note you signed. You do remember it, don't you? The letter, when I finally opened it with shaking fingers, mirrored his words, but in the cold, formal language of the law. It outlined their claim. My parents, Mr. and Mrs. Chun, were asserting a significant financial stake in Nexus Flow, citing substantial past financial contributions towards his professional development and his early career endeavors, and alluding to a binding family agreement. They demanded an immediate meeting to discuss their rightful equity share. The promissory note, a vague memory surfaced, hazy and uncomfortable. Years ago, when I was in my junior year of college, there had been a sudden, unexpected shortfall in my tuition. My parents had initially refused to cover it, creating a crisis. After weeks of agonizing pressure and their dire predictions of my academic ruin, my father had reluctantly agreed to lend me the money, but only if I signed a document he drafted. He dismissed my request for a copy, saying it was just a formality for the family records, a way to keep things straight. I was young, desperate, and naive enough to believe him, to sign that vaguely worded paper that spoke of repaying a sum for future endeavors and support. I was too relieved to question it then. Now that youthful mistake, that act of coerced gratitude, was being weaponized. Leo, it turned out, hadn't just found it. As Nexus Flow had started showing signs of real success, news that had, of course, filtered back to him, his envy and desperation had apparently spiked. The family restaurant supply business, I would soon discover, wasn't just struggling. It was actively sinking, largely due to Leo's chronic mismanagement and his refusal to adapt to a changing market, a truth he'd carefully concealed from our parents, blaming everything on the economy or unfair competition. Seeing my burgeoning success, he'd frantically searched for any leverage, any way to hitch his failing wagon to my rising star. He'd unearthed that old note, and with the manipulative skill he'd always possessed, convinced our father, and through him, our mother, that this was their golden ticket, their legal right to a piece of my hard-earned success. He wasn't just looking for a handout. He was looking for a hostile takeover, a way to be seen as the family savior, using my work. I called Sarah immediately. Her reaction was a controlled explosion of fury. That absolute, Michael, this is beyond predatory. That note, if it's as vague as you remember and signed under duress when you were essentially a kid with no independent legal counsel, not even a copy provided to you, it's on incredibly shaky ground. This stinks to high heaven. A few days later, we were on a conference call. My parents, a visibly smug and preening Leo, their crisp Houston lawyer, me, and Sarah, whose voice was calm but radiated steely resolve. Mr. and Mrs. Chun believe they are entitled to a 30% stake in Nexus Flow. Their lawyer, a man named Marcus Thorne, stated smoothly, given their substantial historical investment in Michael's potential. Leo couldn't resist chiming in, his voice dripping with false magnanimity. Think about it, Mike. Your little computer game could be useful for once. It could integrate perfectly with Chun and Sun Restaurant Supply. We could really turn things around together. The audacity was breathtaking. They wanted to gut my company, my creation, to rescue their failing relic, a business Leo himself had run into the ground. This was their better life for me, to be their financial pack mule, their tech slave. My answer is no, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in my hands. Nexus Flow is not for sale, and it's certainly not yours to claim. Those contributions you speak of were either gifts, what any parent might provide for their child's education, or funds I've more than repaid through years of direct financial support to you. That note was signed under duress and is meaningless. Is this what family means to you? I whispered then, the words escaping before I could stop them, my voice cracking on the last syllable. It was a moment of raw vulnerability, a flicker of the deep hurt that still resonated beneath the anger and resolve. My father's voice came back, cold and hard. Family means supporting each other. Michael, something you've clearly forgotten. We'll see you in court. They threatened lawsuits, public humiliation. We'll tell everyone how you abandoned your family, how you stole our investment. My mother shrieked, her voice rising hysterically, as if rehearsed. Sarah began her counteroffensive immediately. Michael, she said, once the call ended, we're going to fight this. We're going to expose this for what it is. Start gathering every piece of evidence you have. Bank statements showing transfers to them, old emails, anything that demonstrates your financial support over the years. Anything that shows their character. And then, the most unexpected twist. Aunt Susan called. She'd heard about the legal threats. Leo, in his arrogance, had apparently boasted to some relatives about how they were finally going to get what Michael owed them. Aunt Susan's voice, when she spoke to me, trembled with a quiet fury I'd never heard from her before. Michael, I can't stay silent anymore, she said, her words tumbling out. Your father always believed he owned his children. His decisions were law. And Leo always wanted what others had, but never wanted to do the work. He's been running that business into the ground for years, lying to your parents about it. This claim on your company is despicable. Then she dropped the bombshells. I have some emails, Michael, she said, lowering her voice. A distant cousin, Jenny, worked for the family business for a few months last year. She had access to an old shared computer. She found emails between your father and Leo. They were discussing, months before your business trip to Singapore, how they needed to get Michael and his income back under the family roof. They were devising ways to make you see reason, to force you to contribute to the family business. It was premeditated, Michael. The whole thing. My blood ran ice cold. Premeditated. And there's more, Aunt Susan continued, taking a shaky breath. Leo is more deceitful than even your father realizes. I have a voice memo. I accidentally recorded it on my phone. It was a few months after you cut off contact. I had gone over to their house, and Leo was panicking, arguing with your father in the kitchen. He was admitting how bad things really were at Chun and Son, that it was about to collapse. He was practically screaming at your father to use that old promissory note against you, to sue you if necessary. It was their only way out, their only chance to save face and the business. Emails, a voice memo, irrefutable proof of their calculated intent, of Leo's deception not only of me, but of his own parents about the true state of his failures. Mr. Merez, my former superintendent, also readily agreed to provide a formal, notarized statement about my parents' behavior and their false claims that my move-out was prearranged when they emptied my apartment. Sarah was almost euphoric when I told her. This is it, Michael. This is the silver bullet. This isn't just a defense, it's an offense. This shows a clear pattern of manipulation, bad faith, and conspiracy to defraud. Their case is built on lies, and we can prove it. The showdown was about to take a very different turn. The hunted was about to become the hunter. Armed with Aunt Susan's explosive evidence and Mr. Ramirez's compelling statement, Sarah drafted a response to Marcus Thorne that was less a legal brief and more a carefully targeted torpedo. It detailed our counterclaims: invasion of privacy, misappropriation of property, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and, most damningly, attempted fraud and conspiracy, backed by summaries of the email exchanges between my father and Leo, and the key points from the voice memo. To protect Aunt Susan, Sarah referred to her as a concerned family member with direct knowledge and contemporaneous evidence. The message was unequivocal: withdraw their baseless lawsuit and cease all defamatory actions, or face a countersuit that would expose their duplicity in excruciating public detail. Your client's claim isn't just frivolous, Mr. Thorne, Sarah had stated, with icy precision, on a follow-up call. It's based on deception and manipulation, with clear evidence of premeditated bad faith on the part of both Mr. Chun and his son Leo. We're prepared to make all of this evidence public if they persist. The damage to their reputations and to Chun and Sun's already precarious position would be catastrophic. The silence from their side this time wasn't the silence of disdain, but the stunned silence of the cornered. For a week, we heard nothing. Then, a chastened Marcus Thorne called Sarah. His clients were ready to discuss a resolution. The negotiations were swift and brutal, conducted entirely through our lawyers. There was no face-to-face confrontation, no dramatic courtroom confession, just the cold, hard reality of legal leverage. My parents and Leo, faced with irrefutable evidence that would not only humiliate them within their community, but also potentially attract unwanted scrutiny of their business practices, had no choice but to cave. They signed a settlement. All claims against me and Nexus Flow were irrevocably withdrawn. They agreed to a binding injunction to cease all direct or indirect contact and refrain from any defamatory statements. My remaining belongings, those that hadn't been lost or irreparably damaged, were to be returned within 48 hours. I received a modest financial settlement, enough to cover Sarah's fees and leave a little extra, which I immediately donated to a charity supporting victims of domestic financial abuse. The money was never the point. The real victory was my freedom, the breaking of those toxic chains, the validation of my stand. There were no apologies, of course. When Sarah relayed their final capitulation, she mentioned that my father had remained stoic but visibly defeated. My mother, according to Thorne, had wept about the family falling apart, still clinging to her role as the aggrieved victim. And Leo was reportedly incandescent with rage, frustrated. His last-ditch attempt to salvage his pride and his parents' business through my efforts. His final barb, filtered through the lawyers, was a bitter, "You'll regret this, Michael. You think you're so much better than us." It was the impotent snarl of a bully stripped of his fangs. The return of my remaining possessions was a grim affair. Movers hired by their lawyer deposited a few more battered boxes at my door. Opening them was like sifting through the remnants of a past life. A chipped mug, a favorite childhood memento, a couple of water-stained books with warped pages, some clothes faintly smelling, and my parents' mothballs-laden storage. Every damaged item, every missing piece, was a final, petty act of resentment, a testament to their inability to concede gracefully. But looking at those pathetic remnants, I didn't feel anger, but a strange sort of pity. They tried to pack my life into boxes, but they couldn't contain my spirit. The most important things I possessed were never in that apartment. In the months that followed, Nexus Flow truly began to take off. Freed from the looming legal threat and the emotional drain of the conflict, I poured all my energy into my company. We launched new features, onboard larger clients, and even hired 2 more employees. I found myself to be a different kind of leader than I might have been before. More empathetic, perhaps, but also fiercely protective of my team and our shared vision, with an unwavering commitment to ethical practices. Aunt Susan became a quiet, steady presence in my life. We spoke on the phone regularly. Our conversations were never about the drama, but about books, current events, her garden. It was a gentle, undemanding connection, a glimpse of what a healthy family could feel like, a bond forged in truth and mutual respect. My friendships, especially with Sarah, deepened. She'd been my rock, my advocate, and our bond was now unbreakable. I even tentatively started dating again, more cautious, more attuned to the nuances of respect and reciprocity in a relationship. I was building my chosen family, one honest connection at a time. The pain of my family's betrayal didn't vanish overnight. It settled into a dull ache, a scar that would probably always remain. But it didn't define me anymore. Instead, it became part of my story, a testament to my resilience. I used to look at our old family photos, feeling like the part of me that dreamed differently, that yearned for independence, had been awkwardly cropped to fit their predetermined frame. Now, I realized they hadn't cropped me. I had simply chosen to step out of a picture that was too small for me, and I was painting my own, much larger, more vibrant one. I occasionally heard snippets of news about my family through the distant hum of gossip. Chun and Sun Restaurant Supply, finally, inevitably went under. Leo, stripped of his unearned authority and forced to confront his own ineptitudes, reportedly struggled to find his footing. My parents maintained their carefully constructed facade within their community, but I sensed the whispers, the questions, would linger. I felt a distant sadness for the life they'd chosen, for the relationships they'd willingly destroyed in their quest for control, but no regret for the path I'd taken. They tried to define my worth by what I could give them, by how neatly I fit into their mold. I had to learn to define it for myself, by what I could build, by the integrity I could uphold, by the peace I could cultivate in my own heart. My silence had once been their permission. My voice, when I finally found it, became my liberation. They told me their actions were for a better life they'd chosen for me. I discovered, through pain and perseverance, that the best life is the one you choose and build for yourself, even if, for a time, you have to lay the foundation entirely, utterly alone. Losing what I thought was my family was necessary to truly find myself. It makes you think, doesn't it? How do you define family? And what happens when that definition is put to the ultimate agonizing test? If you've ever faced a similar crossroads, know that you are not alone. Sharing our stories, our struggles, and our triumphs is the first step in rewriting them, in reclaiming our own narratives. What boundaries have you had to build to protect your peace? Share your journey. Your story matters.